Hey everyone, it's Noor Nasir, host of AdTech Unfiltered and VP of Media Innovations and Technology at Basis. I assume if you listen to this podcast, you may already know that Centro recently rebranded and now goes by the name Basis Technologies. We are headed into this new episode discussing a topic that I assume many of you may have at least occasionally thought about: consulting in the programmatic media world. Whether you're thinking about seeking out a consultant or consulting services for yourself or your organization, or you've thought about becoming a consultant, there's a lot to discuss on the topic. How do you find the right consultant or consultancy for you and your organization? And have you ever thought about doing some consulting work on the side or becoming a consultant full time? Our guest this episode has tons of meaningful insight on the topic. Helene Parker is the founder and owner of Helene Parker Consulting. Helene has a curated short list of clients, so it's likely you haven't worked with her, but it's quite possible you've heard her voice. She's the host of the Programmatic Digest podcast. It's a great show. Helene has incredible energy, and she has endless passion for programmatic media. I'll be chatting with her about all things consulting, and I would say as a guest, Helene really lives up to the name of the show because she's truly unfiltered. She doesn't hold back to share her feelings on how and why she decided to get into consulting, why and when to work with a consultant, how to find well-suited clients, lessons she's learned along the way, and so much more. This episode on consulting in the programmatic media world starts right now. Ellen, I appreciate you making time for an episode of AdTech Unfiltered this first day of November.
Yeah, happy November. Happy
Happy November.
November. Happy last 2 months of the year. Ready to rock on this 2021 post-pandemic year? Are we in post-pandemic for real, or are we still like, I don't know how to
In
describe
the
this.
midst of the pandemic, I was going to say that sounds a little bit optimistic because there's so many pandemic-y things that are continue to impact our lives. Today, specifically, wanted to dive into something that you're going to be an expert at discussing, which is consulting in the programmatic media, digital media, ad tech landscape. So I want to ask you just that initial origin story question. What got you interested in consulting?
So my story is not very sexy. My background is 100% from an agency side. I've worked very closely with programmatic media teams. I was a trader for years, and then naturally became a strategist and a senior, a leader of a team, and then a director at some point. And so, in the last maybe 4 years of my career, I really wanted something that could challenge me from a different perspective, and where I could naturally and peacefully help with no limitation, no boundaries. I say this to say sometimes our agency model tends to only encourage when it's a benefit to the agency. I understand the perspective where you have to think as and operate as a business, and there's things that need to pay off. But my need and want to learn more and want to share more of the knowledge was very limited working under that agency brackets, that agency umbrella.
Consulting means a lot of different things to different people, and how people choose to be consultants or suggest what services they have
Mhm.
can vary. So, how do you define consulting from the perspective of what Helene Parker brings to the table?
So, my definition of a consultant or consulting specialist or strategist is basically somebody you can hire, work with in collaboration or in partnership to bring a certain level of expertise that you may be missing, but you may not be ready to invest in. I've had a recent client that um, needed support with a DSP onboarding. No one within the department could find maybe the time or the resources to really focus on that. So because I have the experience of the in the DSP, or one of my buyer does, we come in, help onboard the DSP, recording, I mean training recordings for instance, and then leave behind some training materials for this agency that I'm speaking about as an example. And then on an ongoing basis, we provide part-time training to whoever needs to provide training for, or as I mentioned, they're trying to expand their horizon of vendors or partners, and they need somebody that used it like myself to give them a honest feedback. So a consultant can be any of those. You're really in need of some trusted information, experience based, and you hire a consultant. Consultants usually are a temporary fill in the blanks.
So you might have just answered my next
Yeah.
question by that last statement you said just now. When does a person or a brand, a business, a company decide to go with a consultant versus going to an agency?
It really depends. It really depends. Sometimes you might need a consultant to decide on which best agency to use. So just assess what your needs are. I like to give the example. I mean, it's such a basic recommendation, but sometimes just writing it down, visualizing what is missing can help you decide if no, actually, we need a full team, a media agency to come in and step in and take things to the next level, or I think I need an agency. I don't know yet. I think I might need to hire somebody. I'm not sure yet. Then you might look at an individual consultant. I provide both. I can provide, like, my whole agency has a plethora of consultant on contract basis. But I say that to say you just have to look at the details, like the agency. What are you looking for? I'm a big supporter of agencies, but at the same time, I'm a big supporter of brands taking it in house because there's so much opportunity for from both ends of the spectrum. So, short answer is you'll have to assess exactly your needs in order to know if you need an agency or consultant. Long answer would be it might take you a little bit of time, but most of the reason why is because you're just doing a little bit more research in terms of knowing what kind of support you are in need for.
I think a part of that also comes down to realizing what you, organization, brand, what exactly can this organization, whether it's a consultancy or an agency, what can they supply and how does that marry back to our needs? I think sometimes maybe like a consultant versus an agency, sometimes it's shocking that there's a one woman band who can do a lot of things versus going to an agency and gotta kind of test you gotta test it, give it a little trial run to see if one is a better fit versus the other.
Yeah, right on, right on. I think it goes back to your needs and then your amount of resources. I mean, I started as a one man or one woman show because of my experience and knowing everything almost in the book when it comes to being a media trader, the good and the bad. And so naturally, with the way the business has grown and the way the industry has grown, there's a lack of development and training opportunities out there that are efficient and effective from cost and time and resources standpoint. So there's nothing wrong with an individual consultant, and there's also nothing wrong with hiring an agency straight. You just really need to identify which one do you would rather work. Some brands or even some agency would rather just work with an individual, and there's maybe more flexibility versus just an agency that comes with like a media team. I don't know, like we used to joke all the time that on media calls, it used to be 17 of us and like three other clients. Every single call, there's so many media people, but that's just the beauty of an agency. There's an expert at every single, like everywhere in that department. There's like somebody that has expertise in that particular field that can provide the support you need. So it's not an easy answer to some of us that may be in the situation, but there's always some self work before you attain or you receive any help. And that's the self work I'm talking about. Just being able to do that, we call it come to Jesus moment. Just sit down and really assess what you really need and really identify who will help.
Something you mentioned earlier, Ellen, was that eventually you came to a place where you realized that you want to focus in on training, that there's a big need around training. Obviously, you've been in business for a while too. It's been a few years now. How did you get to a place where you realized that that is where there was a lot of momentum or energy or need from clients?
So the first thing I did was assess what I really wanted to do. I used to say that this was a selfish answer, but I am lucky enough to have understood, sorry, my purpose. My heart is 1,000% when I'm talking to somebody. Like right now, I'm super happy. I love not, I love the world of podcasting. I love interviewing with like others, even though I'm on the other end right now. And so in the last 6 7 months, I've done a lot of self-development, and I came across this book called The Big Leap from Gay Hendricks. And he just identified something that he calls zone of competence, zone of excellence, zone of genius. And the zone of genius is something that you can do really comfortably, but like maybe like you're really good at it, but maybe you're sometimes you get bored doing it. But your zone of excellence is like something you were born to do. And I'm not saying that I was born to be in programmatic media, but I know I was born to be in settings where there's certain level of knowledge exchanges. And so once I identify how podcasting made my world rock, I started thinking about, well, what in podcasting do I really like? And the biggest thing was learning from somebody and then sharing my knowledge. And so I said, okay, well, I was talking to a friend and she was like, actually, you trained me way back when we work at an agency. And I was like, oh, I totally forgot. And she was like, yeah, you. And she told me I was the best trainer that she's ever had. I was like, okay. And made me start thinking and reaching out to other friends in the industry and saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And then literally every single signs have aligned to me being a programmatic media coach, or working with a team of traders, just training them. And every time I've worked with an agency for media activation, for running their campaigns, I end up training somebody because I encourage training. I end up writing a newsletter for them. I end up like pulling really important articles and white papers that can help with that particular topic that we're talking about. And so I said, well, why don't I just do this for real, for real? And so that's what I did.
Sounds like education and training are your zone of genius. You kept gravitating in those directions, and
Yeah.
now there's this beautiful, I guess, like serendipity that came with a need to leave that job, or whatever shook out with your departure from of a 9 to 5 career, and then kind of naturally wandering into realizing that there was a lot of value in training and education. Uh, you kind of lightly touched on this too, is that there's a lot to learn. And so when you're teaching others, you simultaneously need to be always learning yourself, teaching
Yep.
yourself. So what
Yeah.
does that look like for you, Ellen? I know recently you ran into some of my colleagues at Programmatic IO. And that's probably one tiny piece of a much larger learning journey. Can you talk us through what are you doing on a daily or weekly basis to keep yourself up to speed?
That's I love this question. This is a great question. Thank you for asking it. So one thing at a time, one thing a day. Okay. There's a lot going on. There's always going to be a lot going on, but just hone in on one theme, one thing that you want to learn, and then read about it. That's it. In the programmatic meetup, which is a community I'm building with the program under my podcast, we are challenging ourselves to read one article a day and then post about it. So why post about it? Because that's how the brain retains. It doesn't matter what you're reading. It has to be industry based, of course. But reading an industry based article from the ad exchanger, media post, a second recommendation I'll do is like follow companies that maybe you want to work for, or maybe you have a particular friend or somebody that you've been following on social media and you're like, yo, I really like their spirit. Even if you're just liking them for what they post, follow their company, sign up to their newsletter, find out what's going on. Most newsletters are very educative. Like it's very easy to stay on track. I always like to give a shout out to the U of Digital, my friends at U of Digital. They have a newsletter that they send once a week, and it gives you a good recap of everything. It's like bite-sized recap, and it's really easy to digest. So you have to do some due diligence in terms of like blocking some time on your calendar. Read that article. I am challenging you additionally to post about it, even if it's just like a quote that you remember, copy pasting into your LinkedIn. Who cares? Whoever you want to post. And then attending industry conferences. I think the Programmatic IO was super bomb. It was nice being in there. Again, it goes back to being in an environment of success, putting you near like-minded people, or people that can take it to the next level, because you don't want to be too comfortable in a room. Otherwise, you're in the wrong room. You want to be in a room that makes you feel uncomfortable enough from being there, only because you want to keep learning from them. And the last recommendation would be podcasting. Like, everybody's on the go, right? Follow a couple podcasts. I think your podcast is excellent when it comes to staying on top of things, reading, podcasting, community, which again goes back to the conference attending.
Your podcast is also excellent, and we'll need to get back to that because you've mentioned the podcast a couple of times, and that's something that you're doing, kind of like the cross pollination of offering a service to clients as a consultancy, but then building community through the podcast. So that'll be my next question: is 9 to 5, it has its ups, it has its downs, and then consultancy, same thing. How one thing you don't really have to do on the agency side, as much as there are people who are responsible for pitching new business, it's not the same thing as being an entrepreneur. So can you talk to us a little bit about the challenge of attracting clients and what your game plan, your roadmap has been for making sure that you're bringing people to the work that you can do?
Game plan has been content creation. And I'm giggling because it's been the utmost challenging thing to do, being able to stay consistent. The beauty with any of those platforms is consistency. And I think it just gave me a good muscle exercise to be consistent in how I pitch or how often I reach out to agency. The beauty of consultancy is the fact that for our business, I'm going to say 95% of it has been referrals. Somebody has worked with me from an agency perspective, has hired me in the past, or has heard of my work from a friend or from my posting online, and they've reached out to me. It's been quite a journey, but it's been very cool to find out like people are actually remember you from this podcast episode. People have seen the Programmatically Correct show, this live series last month. Somebody Googled and came across the website because I wrote this article. So content creation is big when it comes for business development for me. If you had to ask me who is the perfect client to me, is it would be working with a digital marketing agency that wants to offer programmatic media and they don't know where to start again. And so I'm bringing the whole arsenal. I have a team of analysts, have a team of buyers that can implement certain activation, day-to-day activation, while I help implement overarching strategy for that client. And then before we leave, because it's between 3 to 6 month a retention, I would say, and naturally they stay above the 6 months mark, but more on the consultant, like coming in once a month, versus at the beginning of the month is more like the onboarding. We're implementing this. If they need buyer support, then I have buyer supports to provide, all including in my fee. So it's been really nice having somebody tell you like, hey, I heard you did this, or this email came through by our agency friend or a client of ours that used you. So that's why I only work with a selective of maybe 4 to 5 clients. The mission is to help one agency at a time. And the reason why I capped to 5 is because I have a 1 year old and she's my boss babe. And one of the reason why before pandemic happens and before working from home was sexy, one of the reason why wanted to work for myself was to be flexible to grow a family, and that's what happened. So referrals have been, like I said, 95% of the business development on my end. And actually I'm always looking for advice on how to continue growing in that department, because it's a learning curve for me. It's like ups and down when it comes to business development.
I think that you've cracked the code at all, Ellen, is just a testament to your business acumen and your hunger and drive as an entrepreneur. I think a lot of people, maybe they have inclinations on the side, making some time and room to do some consulting, do a little freelancing, but they don't
Yeah.
have a vision for what that should look like. How do I share my expertise? Because so often you show up at an agency and you have siloed work. You do one piece of the pie, 10 other people do other pieces of the pie. Like you mentioned earlier, you work with an agency, they've got 17 people who are all
Hmm.
dedicated to a single account. And then
Yeah.
it's not so easy to just market one piece of a much larger pie. Like when you were creating that initial vision,
Hmm.
some folks, if they think about the idea of consulting on the side, the question
Yeah.
would be, what would I even market? How am I'm doing one tiny piece of something bigger. if I went it alone and offered something, unless I was, I don't know, buying Facebook ads or doing some like search ads, something that's self service, it doesn't feel like I can offer a full bodied solution to a client. It feels like I can only offer one part. So when you were thinking about building that three-dimensional vision of a product, what was architecting that solution like for you?
The short answer would be, well, I came across that obstacle that I had to find a solution for. And so that's how it kept on adding and adding and adding. In my conversation with a client, I always prioritize my training services over media activation. Why is because that's the secret sauce. Period. Um, Agency companies that invest in their people from an education standpoint, from a development standpoint, it has become so much more attractive, especially to millennials employee, because it shows that we're here to pour into you, even though you might take this information and leave us, because we believe in you. We want to grow your person. You want to grow you. And so if I'm still working for a 9 to 5, matter of fact, that's what I did for quite some times before jumping into it. I had one side hustle where I would run campaigns on behalf of clients that had way like smaller budget that my agency wouldn't be interested into running. I just encourage you, if you want to be consultant or if you're thinking about doing it, I encourage you to identify what you're good at and then just do that. Most likely you have something to talk about. You have some recommendation to give. You have some tips to offer based on your experience, period, point blank. Being a consultant is easier than it sounds. Yes, you have to have some level of experience, but anyone and anybody can talk about something they learn and something they've learned from application.
And I think to your earlier point is sometimes you get into a position where it's not the moonlighting, it's the actual decision to make that grand departure because you
Yeah.
see so much opportunity and you have such a strong vision. The best way to move forward is to just cut ties with your full-time job if consulting and owning your own business is important to you. So obviously, you know, Ellen, I've mentioned this to you during this, maybe during this podcast, definitely before the podcast. You're a very optimistic person. You're a seize the day type of person, but doing consulting work is hard. I mean, has there been a recent client challenge that you've encountered that you eventually solved? And how did you come to a place for solving that problem?
That's a good question. The only time I've had a challenge, maybe that's taken me out of character from me being more stressed or overwhelmed. The only time there's been any type of like really hard conversation is because an expectation wasn't set correctly from me or was misunderstood by the client. And don't get me wrong, I had one client in September just reach out to me saying this is not going to work, and that client was media activation only. It was no training, even though I've offered. They just wanted somebody to help fill in the blanks, run their programmatic and paid social campaign, and it didn't work. I don't condone the fake urgency that sometimes comes with an agency. The gotta get it done today. Oh, the client asked for it now. We need to make sure we provide. No, I believe in systems and structures that are set to make sure that your team and the work is successful. And so the client that I am talking about is the solution was to readjust some of the communication style. It was a little bit more hand holding, which I don't always offer, because the client that I work with, they know what they want and they know what they're getting in, right? They know what type of trainer I am. I send you challenges. It's super interactive. I expect this to be sent back. I have one-on-one with you and your team. So there's a lot of perks working with me. But that particular client that was really challenging, it became not very respectful of my time and my peace. So I had to let that client go. There's nothing I could have offered that would have been okay with me and okay with them. But I'll never compromise my peace for a misjudgment or a missed urgency ask from a client. Everything that I do, I make sure there is structures and systems that protects the campaign performance, protects the team's development training and team's happiness, because that leads into productivity, and systems that protects the client, my clients, from a communication standpoint. If you're listening and one of your clients is really stressing you, and you're not even, when you're stressed, you're not even productive. How can you perform if you're not productive? And yeah, it was a revenue loss, but I've regained so much more peace and I've regained so much more happiness. And now with that, I've gained three more clients because I recalibrated some things. And I guess, Noor, since you've asked, it wasn't my proudest moment, but again, things could have been avoided had I had onboarding system that would have prevented some of that. So before client works with me, clearly saying this versus just saying, okay, we can figure it out once we have that onboarding. So now I have a certain level of conversation prior to an onboarding to make sure that we both assess one's scheduling, accessibility, communication style, whatever, whatever. Because we work in advertising, we don't save lives. Now, there are emergency where we're running the wrong creative, or I don't know, that's a real urgency, or the campaign hasn't started, what's going on? But there are systems in place to prevent those type of urgency. It's not my proudest moment, but it was definitely a good learning, and I chose to rose to it, not to let it defeat me, because you learn, you live and learn. And now they find somebody that could respond to their needs. And that's great. That's what we want. But not all clients is your perfect clients. And that's okay. That's okay.
So many circumstances in which what you've described is happening to people, whether you're working independently as an independent contractor, or you're a consulting organization, or you work for an agency, like that mysterious sense of urgency, where in some cases, maybe it truly is urgent because it is something like you're trying to sell a product, there's a product launch, things are going to the wrong page, and it is like the responsibility of the team that they've contracted to get that right. And
Oh,
then,
yeah.
yeah, maybe you got to work on a Saturday or something. Hopefully,
Yep.
not too often that thing is happening. That should have been QA'd better. But there are many other instances where you're wondering, are you taking this and sitting on it just so you have it? Because it's a terrible feeling. And obviously, we can't always validate people who work on the agency side. And once upon a time, I did. But if there are recurring circumstances in which you're getting that feeling of it is taking from my peace, like you said, it's better to let that thing go and move on to other things, especially in your case where you're running the show.
Yeah, and I do want to highlight what you just said, because I think it's really important. There are cases where things should be urgent. Please, if you're listening, don't start emailing all your clients that this is not going to happen no more. Like, I had to put myself accountable for certain things. And my mishap was the lack of clear communication when it came to expectation. I did communicate certain expectation, but not in the language the client maybe understood. And that is something we all need to get better at.
You've mentioned a couple of things across the course of this interview I wanted to touch on for this next question, which is it sounds like there are some key pillars to growing yourself so that you can grow your consulting business. And those include educating yourself on pressing important topics that clients have needs around, refining your skill sets around maybe similar types of topics, understanding how to communicate, convey the levels of service that you're going to bring to clients, and then also build yourself as a business owner. You're the face of the business. You're setting the tone for how your consulting services are going to be offered. Are there other key pillars that you find yourself needing to tend to?
So you said education, self development, communication. I mean, the last thing I may add on, and it goes hand in hand with what we've been saying, is like taking some time for yourself and resting. We work in an industry where burnout is the new B word. I would encourage you to step up for yourself, take some time to rest up, and make sure to unplug from work, because it's not easy doing it when you're working from home. It's easy to work even longer. I think it's a setup. So make some time for yourself. Take some time for yourself to recharge. That means unplug 1000%. I think that's how we recharge. Now, not everybody can. Some of us cannot. They have to work, and That's understandable. But I would encourage you to take at least 5-10 minutes every day in the middle of the day randomly to just unplug completely. You have no idea how much your brain, your body, your soul needs it. We are much more creative outside of our actually job. That means that 85% of the creativity happens when you're not at work. Can you imagine how productive that could be in terms of like coming back from a day that's recharged? When I read the book Who Not How from Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy, that's what they said. That's most of your creativity. It happens outside of work. You're taking a shower. You're on vacation. Most of the time when you're on vacation, you thought about all these amazing ideas. Write them down and execute on it. But take time to let your creativity flow. And sometimes as easy as unplugging for a little bit.
I am 100% in alignment with you. It's too often neglected because the nature of this business is one in which, specifically digital marketing, digital media, the entire idea is that the business wouldn't exist if people weren't addicted to screens. And so we become a part, we are like as consumers on earth today, we're also a part of this, like we're cogs in this bigger wheel. And so I agree. You don't recharge until you disassociate with these devices. So it's a really
Yeah.
good point for people.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really encourage you to do it. I think it'll be great. But of course, there's a lot of things that we should mention as well. Like if you have a mental health issue, disease, challenges, sometime letting your mind wander can also create more stress onto you. So I just want to preface that out there that it might not be easy or most natural for some of us because of our condition. And that's also okay. But there's help out there to help you get into the perfect creativity zone. If taking a shower, to give the example of taking a shower or going to the pool, is not something that helps you unplug because your mind is so stressed or your heart is something is heavy on your shoulder, there's help for you.
Wanted to ask you another question or two before wrapping things up. One thing I'm curious about is just how you stay motivated. Something that is natural to the 9 to 5 is that work is dictated top down. So work comes down to you and then you do it. And there is expectations, set timelines, whatever rung of the ladder you sit on, it's just the nature of the beast. Now you're in charge. You play a massive role in deciding which clients come on and how you serve those clients. How do you keep yourself accountable and motivated?
Oh man, that is so that's such a great question, and I'm still figuring it out. I'm gonna take it back to my husband on this one. He is a great supporter of me. He quit his 9 to 5 last year to help me with my business, and the growth has been exponential because his background is very project management and naturally like he's like a natural like CFO in our household. So now he holds the CFO role in my business, and when it comes to down to money, that is a big motivator. But what I mean by motivator is not like, oh, we want to be millionaire earning whatever. It's more like, how do we make sure that whatever income we now have is utilized the best way possible. I have standards that I have set in my life that allows me to keep that motivation. I'm working on, I call them the $1 million habits that's going to keep me on my $1 million path, because I'm developing those habits by doing the same thing every day. Some people will be like, oh, it's boring, it's a routine. Actually, routine helps us save more time. Some people say routine is longer, it takes more time. No, it takes time to implement. And there's another thing that I want to mention is that it doesn't take, 21 days to form a habit. That actually is incorrect. It was proven scientifically that it takes 66 days. So if you want to be a consultant, I encourage you to do the same thing 66 days in a row, starting tomorrow. And some of the things is to research what that means, research how to come across as a consultant, and then implement. I have a total of seven habits that I started implementing the last 2 weeks. Connect with my squad, do one money generating activity that goes back to building up my business development. Think $1 million thoughts. I think that's like one of the most challenging one, because we think 85% of our thoughts are negative, like naturally as human beings. Like 8 out of 10 thoughts that you're having is negative. So to me, practicing gratitude is a big thing. So I started practicing gratitude and making sure that every time I let my emotion get in the way, I take a step back and I'm like, okay, let me like do some thought work here, like reframe things. Is that really worth this emotion? Is this, granted, I do some work there. And then lastly, set and enforce a boundary. Even though my calendar is available, it does not mean that I'm available for a call. I'm going to set a boundary where if somebody reach out to me on Slack or on Teams, I will not respond, or I'll respond with taking the next 45 minutes to focus on my work or on my optimization or on reviewing this and that or on reaching out to new clients, and cannot address this until this time. It's okay to do that. So those are the type of boundaries I'm talking about. There's always a certain thing that you have to ask your question, like, can somebody help me accomplish this? Or can this be pushed for a little bit later until I'm able to focus on my one thing, which is whatever goal you're working on.
What is a topic that you're excited to educate yourself on moving into 2022 from a programmatic media and ad tech perspective?
So I thought it was CTV until I went to the conference. It is still CTV. I'm well educated on the world and CTV ecosystem, but I think I'm going to shift my attention to brand safety, especially as we move into a cookie-less world, because there's a lot of tactics and strategies thrown at us with identity solution, contextual targeting, first party data, whichever. But I think none of those strategies is going to bring us the revenue that is needed unless we really have brand safety pre and post brand safety settings implemented in our strategy as part of that brand integrity. So, brand safety is something I want to learn more about how to physically implement, because brand safety is almost all about how spend happens. So if we think of, like, if we give an example of a quick, like, impressions, brand safety on impressions, you have your pre-bid filters. The reality is, like, you might be spending an extra 30 cents here because Pure 39 filter is added, but the reality is that sometimes you still pay for the 30 cents, but it's still not executed the way you thought it would have. So pre-bid filtering is just as important as post-bid filtering, which is just identifying how many of this impression are actually viewable, fraudulent, or even like have served in a contextually relevant environment based on that pre-bid filter. So brand safety is a topic that I think I'm going to make a passion, because it's not talked about enough. From an industry perspective, I think when we're talking projections, very curious about how the whole CTV game is going to move. We recorded a 200% increase in streaming in 2021 because of the pandemic. It's not increasing as much this year, but the increase is still pretty significant, and a lot of budget is being removed, shifted out of linear into streaming, which was always expected for streaming to pick up on linear. Really excited about some of the partnership that are going to happen, some of the mergers, the new measurement capabilities that's going to have to be born out of the fragmentation of the CTV world. I think mobile is going to surprise us too, because a lot of people are still on their phone. So with the iOS and Facebook announcement, the rebranding announcement, I think mobile strategies or mobile marketing is going to shift a little bit on us. So that's going to be cool to learn about.
Brand safety, CTV, the future of mobile, all hot topics. I agree. They're all things for people to dive into. I think in some ways, all three of them are also oldies but goodies, maybe most particularly brand safety and mobile. We feel like they
Yeah.
were real hot to talk about like half a decade ago, but the reality is there are not just cracks, but actually there's a big void in terms of how much more we need to learn about those things. I'll leave it at that. I know I've already had a nice lengthy conversation with you, and you've got a lot of things to do. Like you said, you got to balance your time. So Ellen, I appreciate your time. Ellen Parker is the founder and owner of Ellen Parker Consulting, and she is also the host of the Programmatic Media Podcast. Wait, I'm saying it wrong.
Programmatic Digest podcast.
The Programmatic Digest podcast. It is a really good podcast. It stinks that I just flubbed the title, but the podcast is so good, and Ellen's energy is incredible. You should give it a listen. Like and subscribe, whatever people do on social media these days. Make sure you're doing that with all of Ellen's social. And so, yeah, with that, Ellen, appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Noor. I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and I would love to come back if you have me. I think this is such a great conversation to have, and we're not having it enough. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks again to Helene Parker, founder of Helene Parker Consulting, for all her advice on consulting and programmatic media. I love her candor on everything she's done to build up her business and the personal discipline required to keep things growing onward and upward. People tend to glamorize working for yourself, but it can mean a ton of work in the ad tech world if hearing from Ellen was any indication. Also, great reflections regarding how to identify the type of consulting services you may need for your agency, brand, or business. Or if none of those things apply to you, maybe this episode has inspired you to think about getting into some programmatic media consulting yourself. Hearing from Ellen doesn't have to end here. She's endlessly sharing content that could be of value to you if you're in the ad tech, digital media, or digital marketing worlds. So give her a follow and give her podcast a listen to as well. It's called the Programmatic Digest podcast. In fact, Ellen and I also recorded an episode of her podcast, so maybe go and give that a listen too. And while you're at it, if you like what you're hearing, subscribe to AdTech Unfiltered in the podcasting app of your choice. That's it for this episode. I'm Noor Nasir. We'll be back soon with more AdTech Unfiltered.